Hello friends, welcome to today's video. Today I want to talk to you about all of the books that I read in the past 4 months. I know it might sound like a lot, but actually in late spring I was in a bit of a reading slump, so I didn't read too much, and in total I have 10 books to talk to you about today, so let's get started. The first book that I finished in March was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I really love her books because they're extremely fast-paced. In this story, you are following a family of multiple siblings who all live in Malibu, and all of them are very famous, well-known surfers and also models. And the eldest sister of this family is throwing a massive house party. That's something that she does every year, but this seems to be the last one that she wants to do for a while. So you follow a dual timeline with the actual party and everything that happens there. There's a lot of drama. There are a lot of very famous actors, musicians who attended, and so many things go down during that party. But you also have a timeline of their parents and seeing how they first met, and also discovering a bit about the relationship between the kids and their parents, and specifically between them and their dad. For me personally, Taylor Jenkins Reid books either work really well or don't work at all, and I think this is one of the few exceptions that was kind of in the middle. I enjoyed it. I really like the setting. Honestly, I like any book that is set in California for some reason. And also the characters, I don't think I liked any of them, and I don't think any of them are likable, but it was fun. It was filled with so much drama. There's so much stuff going on, and so many bad decisions and mistakes are being made throughout the course of this book. But it is definitely very entertaining. It's kind of like reading a gossip column in a magazine. I also enjoyed the fact that it is very loosely connected to Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and also to Carrie Soto is Back. Now, you don't need to read those two books in order to read this one, or you don't need to read Malibu Rising in order to go into the other one. So I just enjoyed the fact that Taylor Jenkins Reid books are slightly interconnected, which was really fun. The reason why I didn't give this book a high rating was because it is loosely connected to some of the historical fires that happened in Malibu, and actually the opening of this book is about one of those fires. So essentially this is the story how this fire started, but it has to do with this entire family. And I almost felt like this book was trying to be a little too philosophical for what it was actually about. For me, it felt like the ending of this book was trying a little too hard. Like it was trying to be more than what it actually was. But overall, I enjoyed this book. If you're in a reading slump or you want something very fast-paced, I would always recommend Taylor Jenkins Reid books. They're just so fast to fly through, and they're always entertaining to an extent. They always have so much drama, so I had fun reading this book. The second book that I finished in March was Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I really loved this book. It is definitely a much sadder, deeper, darker read, but I do really recommend it if you're up for it. In the story, you're following the place called Beartown. It is a small remote community where there is not a whole lot going on, but they do have a junior hockey team who are very talented, and essentially the economy of the entire town and the lives of all of the people who live in this town revolve around hockey. So the boys who play for this team obviously are under a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility, not only for themselves but also for the well-being of the entire community. And besides them, there are just so many other characters in this book. So the beginning of this book can be a little overwhelming because you're introduced to so many new characters, but as the story progresses, the stories of all of those characters start to intertwine. I would say please check trigger warnings for this book because there are a lot of events here that are very traumatic, very sad, and there is quite a lot of injustice that is just heartbreaking, but at the same time the payoff is great. I think it is so beautifully written. It is such a sad story, but it is also such a beautiful story in a way because there are so many aspects of it that are hopeful, that are so good, and then so many that are so tragic and sad. It's a beautiful book. I do really recommend it if you're up for something that is definitely much darker and sadder. Please do make sure that you're okay with the content warning of this book. I'm very excited to continue this trilogy, even though from the vlogs that I've seen, it seems like it's only going to get more heartbreaking and more sad, so we'll see how it goes, but I think it is very beautifully written. I do really recommend it. I love Fredrik Backman's writing. I think for the majority of his books, he has a very nice balance between humor and sadness, and both are just intertwined with all of his stories. This one, I would say there's a lot less humor and a lot more sadness, so please be prepared. It's definitely one of the darker reads from him, but it is beautiful nevertheless. The next book that I read is a novella, and that is The Emperor's Soul by Brendan Sanders. Sanderson. This is a novella that is set in Cosmere, one of his most popular universes. Technically, this book is part 2 of Elantris. However, you don't necessarily have to read Elantris in order to read Emperor's Soul, and I haven't personally read Elantris, but I enjoyed The Emperor's Soul as a standalone novella. In this book, you're following Shai, and she has a very interesting magic that is called forging. So essentially, she can recreate any object, but in order to do that, she needs to know every single material that goes into the making of this object. She needs to know the history of she really needs to know everything about this object, everything that has ever happened to it. And at the beginning of the book, Shai is a prisoner, and she gets told by her captors that essentially if she is able to recreate the soul of the emperor, who has recently fallen sick, and so his body is functioning but his mind is not there anymore, so if she's able to recreate his soul, they won't keep her alive. So she has this 100 days in order to recreate the soul of this emperor, and it is a very difficult task, and people don't really use forging in order to create other people. It's only meant for objects. So performing this task is a very big challenge for Shai, and you are following her story as she's trying to deal and figure out how she can do that. I think if you have never read anything else by Brandon Sanderson, it could be a really fun way to get into his books, because it definitely has like that recognizable Brandon Sanderson voice. I know that a lot of his bigger books and larger series are being recommended as a starting point, but I do think that a short novella like this could be a great way just to get a taste of what his books are like. I did really enjoy the magic system of this world. I also quite like the characters. I think it was quite short to really fully get attached and be immersed in this world, but for a short story, it was really good. I gave this book 4.5 stars because I love Brandon Sanderson, and I thought it was really good. And the last book that I read in March was Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands, which is the second book of the Emily Wilde's trilogy by Heather Fawcett. I really enjoyed that book. I love this series so far. It's such a cozy, feel-good historical fiction, fantasy, romance. It's many things, but it is very cute. You're following Emily Wilde, who studies fate. During the course of the series, Emily Wilde goes to these different expeditions in order to do research for her studies, and she travels with her massive dog, who's like almost a beast, and then her what used to be an academic rival, who became later a lover, Wendell. Wendell is very funny. I love in general like their dynamic. I love the character of Emily Wilde. I like the fact that she's like very strong, very determined. I love the fact that she's stubborn and she really puts herself and her studies first. And I think these books are just so charming and feel good. The second book of the series, we're actually following them as they go to the Alps, which I really love the setting of this book. And also I enjoyed quite a lot of the events, and specifically like the developments in romance I thought were really fun in this one. So I really had a lot of fun reading this book. I gave this book 4 stars. I highly recommend this series. It is so fun, and I cannot wait to pick up book 3. I started off April really strong because the first book that I picked up was The Fellowship of the Ring. This is part 1 of the Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I do have a vlog on my channel where I have the full reaction to reading this book for the first time, so if you are interested in checking that out, please feel free to. I had so much fun with this world. It was absolutely incredible. As someone who loves fantasy, I've always felt a little intimidated about the Lord of the Rings, because I always had that in my mind that it's like this high fantasy, probably like a very complex world. There must be like so much very complex world building, and I will probably not understand half of it, and I was intimidated by it for the longest time. And I just feel so sad that this is what I thought these books were like, because in reality they're just so charming. I mean, I only read the first one so far, so this one was so charming and entertaining. I really wish I knew how funny this book is before I picked it up, because Tolkien's sense of humor is just, it's top tier. It's so funny. I had so many moments when I just giggled and I had the best time. I do think at times it can be overwhelming because there are a lot of characters and also there's like a lot going on, but it is just such a fun journey. I had so much fun. This is definitely a 5-star, by the way, and definitely my new all-time favorite. I cannot wait to continue with the Lord of the Rings books, and also I'm definitely going to be rereading this at some point in the future because I just had the best time. This was so charming, but also there was so much to this world. There are so many things to uncover. There are so many secrets. This book is so rich and lush, and I loved it so much. If you have not read Lord of the Rings and you like fantasy, please do yourself a favor and pick up book 1. I will promise you, you will love it because I really don't know how you cannot love it. And I think ultimately this is just a masterpiece, and it is a fantasy classic for a reason. Obviously, like, I haven't read books 2 and 3 yet, but I'm very looking forward to it, and it was just an amazing time. The second book that I completed in April was Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This is a young adult sci-fi. It's set in the year 2044, not that far off from where we are now, but basically you're following the Earth as, you know, there's economic crisis, there's climate crisis, everything is in crisis, and things are just not looking too good. But in this world there is this video game that exists. It's called Oasis, and it's basically like a virtual reality video game. So most of the people spend their time inside of this video game instead of reality because the video game is just so much better, and even schools teach within the video game rather than in-person actual schools. We're following the main character Wade. He's a teenager, and the creator of this video game Oasis recently passed away, but on the day of his death there was a message that got released to all of the players of Oasis saying that he left many Easter eggs within the video game, but whoever is able to solve all of those clues will be able to essentially inherit the ownership of the Oasis. So we're following Wade as he's trying to get to this main prize and see how he can solve all of those mysteries. I gave this book 4.25 stars. I actually really enjoyed it. It was very fast-paced. It's actually one of the books that I recommended in my how to get out of a reading slump video, because I do really think that this is one of those books that's just like so much action is happening that it will be able to get you out of a reading slump if you are in one. Essentially, it was really fun. It definitely reads like YA, and also I felt like it's more written towards like a male audience. It's just like the way some of the things were phrased. I just felt like it's mostly written for teenage boys rather than women, but you know, it was still entertaining and it was still fun. Also, this book was published in 2011, and I think parts of it read very much like it is a baby of 2011. One of the examples is that money is referred in this book as dough, and it is mentioned so many times, like that word is mentioned so many times that at some point I wanted to scream. But overall, I actually had a lot of fun reading this book, even though, as I said, like it feels like it's written for boys. Actually, I really appreciated how female characters are written in this book. If you're looking for a fast-paced read, I would recommend this one. The only book that I finished in May was Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. This is her newest release, and I gave this book 3.5 stars. I didn't quite love it. In this story, you're following a journalist who goes on this small island in order to write a story about this lady Margaret. She essentially comes from a very rich family that owned many media outlets, but also at some point she married a very famous musician. Some years ago, she kind of went completely off the grid. She disappeared from the public eye and no one really knows anything about her. And all of a sudden, she decides to write her biography. And so she hires these two journalists who are the main two characters of the story. And they're competing between themselves in order to write this biography for Margaret. You also have, of course, the romance between them. I personally felt like this book was very weirdly structured. It pretty much splits 50-50 into the litfic part and the romance part. I didn't really love the romance. I mean, once they got together, it was cute, it was fun, but then there was no real tension between them. It was very much instant lovey, which is very unlike Emily Henry. Like, she is known for her really great banter and a lot of like deep connection between her main characters. In this case, it felt like those two characters got into the relationship so fast and I didn't really see where this connection came from. Also, at the beginning of the book, they're enemies, but the progression from them being enemies to lovers feels just so shallow that it almost feels like it's like an exploitation of the trope that is very popular. I surprisingly really liked Margaret's storyline. I know that a lot of people have complaints about it and found it quite boring. I personally really liked it, even though it is a slower paced kind of story, and it definitely reminded me of some of the Taylor Jenkins Reid books. Overall, I just feel like the story wasn't really very memorable. Even now, as I think back on it, I don't remember the names of the main characters. It's a bit of a blur in my memory already, even though like it's been just over a month since I read it. I don't think it is Emily Henry's strongest release. I do think she has much better books. This one, it was okay. I started off June by reading Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillick. This is the second book of the Shepherd King duology by her. It is like a fantasy romantasy. When I was making a list of all of the books that I need to talk about today, I saw that I gave this book 3.5 stars. And now that I look back at it, I'm like, how was it not a 4-star? I don't know. I think this book deserves to be a 4-star book. It wasn't quite perfect. I definitely liked the first book of this duology more, but I don't think it was a 3.5 stars. So I'm going to change the rating to 4 stars. I think in the second book, we almost have like less time with the romance that happens in the second book, but I do think that the romance itself was much better than the one in the first book. And there was so much like yearning, so much, it was just beautiful. I did really enjoy the romance of the second one. This duology is also known for its gothic atmosphere, and it definitely holds up in book 2, and I really enjoyed the atmosphere of this book. I also really enjoyed how the overarching like magical plot of this book got resolved. I liked the ending quite a bit, but I do think the pacing was slightly off at times. I also would say that some parts of the ending felt a little too convenient, but it's all good. You know, overall I really enjoyed this duology. I'm very glad that I finished it. I do think I'm going to be on the lookout for anything else that Rachel Gillick writes. I have not yet picked up The Night and the Moth by her, but I really want to soon, because I do think she writes beautiful atmosphere, and I enjoyed the romance and many other aspects of the Shepherd King duology. I also really love the magic system of this book. Overall, I had a lot of fun with this series. I do highly recommend it if you're looking for a new fantasy that has like a really strong romance element and where romance is pretty present. I would recommend looking into the Shepherd King duology because it is really fun. Then I finished a cozy fantasy, and that was The House in the Ceruan Sea by T.J. Klune. I love this book so much. I gave it 4 stars. So in the story, you're following Linus, and he is an office worker, but he needs to oversee all of the orphanages that hold magical children of this world, and he needs to make sure that all of the children are treated well and the conditions are good and so on. And one day he gets called by the extremely upper management, which is literally the actual name of his bosses, and they tell him that he needs to go on this work trip to a remote island to oversee this orphanage that holds some very peculiar children, and apparently they're actually very dangerous. So he goes on this trip, and he's someone who's like very set into his routines, but also he lives a pretty lonely life, and he doesn't really do much except work. I absolutely adored the characters of this book. They are so cute, all of them. It's truly charming and adorable and so cute. I absolutely love the found family aspect of this book. It is a cozy fantasy, but it's not really like slow paced. I found that some cozy fantasies haven't worked for me in the past because they were just cozy, but there wasn't really like much going on. But this was an exception. It's definitely a book that has quite a bit of action in it, while at the same time being very cozy and cute and just heartwarming. I had so much fun reading this book. I do really recommend it, especially like if you feel a little bit down. It's definitely like one of those really light-hearted books that makes you feel better. There were a couple of small notes I had that prevented me from giving this book 5 stars. One of them is that some of the dialogue is very repetitive, specifically like the main character. He reacts to everything saying, "Oh dear," but it repeats so many times that at some point I just got a little bit annoyed by it's just like the same phrase over and over again, even though like it is charming and it definitely adds to his character at the beginning. But as you go on, it kind of just, you want a little bit more variety in the dialogue. I did find that some of the messages of this book, even though I liked the messages themselves and all of them are like a very kind, sweet things that we all need reminder of once in a while, I did think that some of them were like layered a little too thick. Like it almost felt like at some points this book read as middle grade rather than an adult book. There was one more aspect of this book that I found a little odd, and it is the fact that Linus, at the beginning of the book, we are told that he has gained a bit of weight, and essentially it's like used as a tool to show that he has been doing nothing except going to the office, and that he's like so settled into his routine and he's not really like taking full on care of himself. And okay, that's fine. But then as he goes to the island, we see him do a lot more activities, and then he starts to lose weight. However, there are some moments when I thought the messaging around food was a bit weird. Specifically, there is a scene when they go for ice cream and then they come back. So Linus is in a bad mood and he tells himself that, oh, I'm not going to have dinner because I already had ice cream, so I should not eat because I'm trying to lose weight. And I just felt like, this is a cozy fantasy. I don't think this needs messaging. I mean, I don't think anything needs messaging like this, but even more so in a cozy book is just a weird messaging. I feel like for someone who might be struggling with these themes, it's kind of a weird message, especially in a cozy fantasy. And yeah, no one should be skipping meals if they have ice cream, basically, is what I'm saying. Can we all just universally accept the fact that ice cream is just good for you? It's good for your soul, okay? It doesn't do anything bad to you. I don't know. It was good. It was fun. There were a couple of moments that were a bit of a hiccups for me, but overall I did really enjoy it. It's very cute and cozy. The next book that I finished in June was The Deep Sky by Yume Kitase. This is a sci-fi. We are following the main character Asuka, who is a member of this space crew, and they're on their way to this distant planet. However, there is an explosion that happens on the ship, and so we start the book with trying to investigate what is happening and who is responsible, because it seems like it's one of the crew who are responsible for this explosion. The selection process for this crew was very complicated and it took many years of training, and Asuka is the only person on this spaceship who essentially has like no primarily role. She essentially just helps whatever odd job there is, and she has the sense that she has not deserved her place on the spaceship. Also, this book follows dual timelines, so you see what is happening on the ship as the crew is trying to figure out what is happening with the explosion and how to fix the damage that's been done. But also we are following the past timeline to see how these kids were trained to be on the spaceship and the relationships that they formed throughout their training. It is somewhat of a different book than what I expected, because I think it is positioned as this murder mystery slash thriller in space, but in reality it is more of like a character driven story. It is an exploration of different relationships of characters and sense of belonging, responsibility, feeling good enough or perfectionism, and it is definitely a story more about the characters and those themes than it is about the mystery. A lot of the plot twists of this book were rather predictable, but I didn't really mind that because again, the action is very much the backdrop of this story, and I really enjoyed it. It's very like atmospheric. I enjoyed discovering these characters. I didn't love all of them, but I definitely really loved Asuka and I felt so much empathy for her. It was very interesting to go through this whole situation with her and to kind of see her perspective. So I really enjoyed it. If you like sci-fi, especially if you liked like more like slower character driven stories, I think it is a very interesting pick. I gave this book 3.75 stars because I think there were moments when it was a little too slow paced. I think it could have been a shorter book. It's almost like 400 pages if I'm not mistaken, and I think it just could be a little shorter in order to be more impactful. But otherwise, I had a lot of fun. I'm glad that I read it. It wasn't quite a 5-star, but still it was a really great time. I feel like I have been talking for so long, but we have one last book to talk about, and that is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. This was a DNF for me. I gave this book 1 star. It was just everything about this book was just not for me, unfortunately. Originally, I was going to DNF it just under halfway point, but then I pushed myself to read a bit more and it was fine for a while, and then at 68%, I was just completely done with this. This is a thriller mystery. It's like a Scandinavian noir. I don't know. I like the atmosphere of this book, but then there were so many disturbing things about it, which I don't really know if we needed to go into this much detail. Please, if you decide to read this, check the trigger warnings because there is so much of it and it's very detailed. Specifically, there is a lot of detailed SA scenes that are done repeatedly, and also there is a lot of violence against animals, which I cannot stand. In terms of the premise of this book, you're following the protagonist who is like a political journalist, Michael Bloomquist, and he recently lost a trial against a big corporation, and now he's hired by this very wealthy man to discover a murder mystery that happened like 20 or 30 years ago, a long time ago. And so he lives on a remote island in Sweden and he's trying to dig up the archive to see if he can solve this mystery. And at the same time, we follow a parallel perspective of this girl with a dragon tattoo. I don't even remember her name anymore. A lot of this book just got completely wiped from my memory the second I closed it because I was like, no, I did not read. But essentially, she's a very talented private investigator, and eventually she also gets on this case and tries to figure out the murder mystery alongside Blomquist. I was actually relatively invested in the murder mystery storyline of this book, but unfortunately it's just such a slow unfolding mystery, and there were so many other storylines beside this in this book. There were so many descriptive scenes that I don't think aided the main plot whatsoever. This book is chunky, there is so much of it, and it's so wordy to the point where I don't think it's doing a great job at capturing readers' attention. I definitely was bored at many parts of it, and even though the language is very easy to digest, at the same time it just was unnecessarily long in my opinion. And also, yeah, as I said, there were a lot of very disturbing scenes, specifically a lot of assaults and a lot of violence against animals that I could not read. I was like, this is where I draw the line. This is where I need to stop. And yeah, that's where I stopped. In a way, I think this book actually made me feel like, on one hand, I could be like a murder mystery thriller reader, because there are some aspects of it that I really, really like. I just think this particular style, whatever that is not for me, because it was too much. But yeah, at some point, this book just started to put me in a slump, and I didn't see the point of continuing it. Originally, this book was published in Swedish under the name Men Who Hate Women, which I feel like is such a better title rather than A Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. Just for you to know what this book is about, it's about men who hate women violently. Unfortunately, this was just not a book for me, and I decided to DNF it, and I'm honestly really glad that I did. So that is going to be all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you have read any of the books that I mentioned, what you thought about them. I would love to hear from you, or maybe just let me know what have you been reading recently, what have you been up to recently. I love chatting to you. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. I hope you have a lovely day, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye!